Hello there and welcome to another edition of Ask David. The summer does seem to be starting to recede. Autumn weather, sunny skies, cooler nights, and it's bringing on a whole host of things that are starting to concern you. So let's get on and answer some of your questions. So first this week, Carolyn asks about her courgettes. She's saying that earlier in the year they were really pumping out the courgettes, they were picking them every day, they were getting quite big quite quickly, but now she says that they are taking a few days to produce some quite small courgettes, and she's wondering whether there's anything she can do to speed up the development process or whether they're doing anything wrong. She's saying that she's already had to get rid of a couple of the courgette plants because of mosaic virus. Now, Carolyn, the thing is here that we're starting to get into autumn. The nights are getting colder, and that really makes a difference to any plant that's growing outside, and courgettes are a sort of a tender plant, and so as the nights get colder and the day length shortens, it's just taking the plant a lot longer to make the energy that it needs to swell those courgettes. So don't panic. Just try and keep them going for as long as possible. You could pop a bit of fleece over them last thing at night just to maintain the temperature around the leaves, but to be honest, I don't think it will make that much difference. It's just playing that waiting game to see whether you can get as many of the fruits from the plants before the cold nights win the battle and the plants give up the ghost. Now next, Laurence has got in touch about his roses. He's got a couple of shoots on one of his rose plants that are quite strong and vigorous, coming from low down on the plant, and he's wondering whether they're suckers. He sent me a photo. I have to say, from the look of the photo, I don't think they are suckers. I think they're just really strong, vigorous shoots that are coming from the variety that's been grafted onto the top of the rootstock. So I wouldn't panic about them. I think that's a really good, strong bit of vigorous growth that you can prune back by about half next spring, and that will encourage lots of side shoots that will produce an abundance of roses. But if you are worried that the rose is producing suckers, invariably you'll see that the number of leaflets on the leaves is different from a cultivated variety if it is a sucker. So for suckers, generally it's around 7-9 leaflets per leaf on the sucker growth, and on the standard cultivated variety, i.e. the top growth that you want to keep, generally speaking that's 5 leaflets per leaf. So just do a bit of arithmetic, counting up on the leaflets, and it should determine whether they're sucker growth or whether they're the variety that you want to retain. Thaksha's got in touch about her lavatera, or lavatera, depends how you pronounce it, and she's saying that she cut it back in the summer because it was getting too big for its space, and she just wanted to make the space again, so she pruned it fairly hard back, and now she's saying that it's not having any flowers. Thaksha, what you did wrong here, I think, is that you pruned it too hard when it was in maximum growth, and the plant is now trying to make back the growth, the side shoots that it needs to produce those flowers. Now, if you want to keep your lavatera or lavatera under control, the best thing to do is prune it just before it starts into growth in the spring. So prune it really brutally hard back almost to the ground in around the end of March, and then it will produce vigorous new stems from the base, and those vigorous stems in around about May you can pinch out the growing tips to encourage it to produce side shoots, and then you'll get a reasonably compact free flowering shrub that will flower right the way through the summer. Next, Chris has got quite an interesting question about compost that he's used for other crops. So he says that he's grown some garlic in pots in particular compost. Now he's harvested that garlic this year, and he wants to know whether it's safe to replant some more garlic in that old compost ready for next year. So Chris, here I would be inclined to put fresh compost into that pot for your garlic. You could use that compost for growing other things, but the worrying thing for me would be planting other members of the allium family in it. So I wouldn't plant onions or leeks in that same compost, because there's a chance that you might get white rot fungus or other fungal diseases going over into the next crop in that old compost. Also bear in mind that the plants have taken out most of the energy from that compost, but more importantly it will have started to denature, and you may have seen that compost level start to sink in the container, which means that the organic matter has been used up. So if you are going to reuse that compost for another crop of something else other than garlic or onions, as I say, if you are going to use that compost for something else, then I'd be inclined to knock it out of the pot, knock it out of the container, mix in some fresh compost, certainly some just ordinary multi-purpose compost would do to up the levels of organic matter, and then you can pop it back into the pot and replant something else. And the last question I'm going to answer this week comes in from Matt, and he says that this time last year he planted some snowdrops and some fritillaria bulbs, and he said that by the spring earlier this year he got precious little in the way of flowers for all the planting that he did, and he's wondering whether he went wrong in any way and how I can help. Now Matt, when you're planting bulbs, make sure that you buy them as soon as they come into the shops. So get them while they're really fresh, and that way the bulbs will be really plump and moist. And then if you plant them immediately, you get hold of them, they'll go into moist, warm soil at this time of year, and they'll root down into the soil and they'll do really, really well. They've been lifted from the growers' fields and they need to go back into the soil quickly, otherwise those bulbs will just start to dry out, particularly if they're in a garden centre under glass where they might dry out in their packaging. So I think that's what happened. The bulbs didn't perhaps go into the soil quickly enough, and the bulbs started to wizen and dry out. Get them in as soon as possible and they'll get rooted and grow away next spring and give you a fantastic display. Also make sure that you plant them at the correct depth for the type of bulb, and the rule of thumb for that is that you plant at 3 times the height of the bulb. So you need to make a hole. At the bottom of the hole needs to be 3 times as deep as the depth of the bulb, and then you'll get really good success. Now, if you want any more advice about growing spring bulbs, then my masterclass is happening this Friday. It's the BBC Gardener's World Masterclass online, all about success with planting spring bulbs. And now is spring bulb planting time. So hopefully you'll join me and pick up all those hints and tips to make sure that you get maximum bloom next spring. So that's another week's worth of questions answered. I hope that gives all of you some ideas about what might be wrong with your plants and how to become better gardeners.